Caroline married Riverdale's most powerful man to save her family's farm. But when buried secrets, a ghost from the past, and a kiss that felt too real threatened their business-only pact, will this arrangement turn into something neither expected? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun shone through the dusty windows of the Walsh farmhouse kitchen as Caroline wiped sweat from her forehead. At 37, her hands were already showing the years of hard work, calloused and strong just like her father's had been. She stared at the stack of bills on the table, each one marked with an angry red "Final Notice." "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered, touching the photo of her father that still hung on the refrigerator door. James Walsh had been gone for 8 months now, but the hole he left seemed to grow bigger every day. The sound of a car coming up the gravel driveway pulled Caroline from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 7 in the sea. Morning. Through the window, she saw a sleek black SUV that looked completely out of place against the backdrop of her weathered barn. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, his posture stiff and formal. Caroline recognized him immediately, Graham Hale, owner of Hale Farming Enterprises and the richest man in 3 counties. What on earth was he doing here? Caroline quickly smoothed her hair and straightened her worn flannel shirt before stepping onto the porch. "Mr. Hale," she called out, not bothering to hide the surprise in her voice. "This is unexpected." Graham Hale approached with measured steps. At 43, his dark hair was starting to gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look that matched his reputation. His face rarely showed emotion, another thing he was known for. "Ms. Walsh," he said with a nod. "I apologize for coming unannounced. I was hoping we could talk." Caroline gestured toward the porch swing. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you." Graham remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "I'll get straight to the point. I understand your farm is facing foreclosure." Caroline felt her face flush with both embarrassment and anger. "My financial situation isn't public knowledge, Mr. Hale. In small towns, very little stays private," he replied evenly, "especially when it concerns property that borders my own." That's when it clicked. The eastern edge of the Walsh farm ran alongside Hale's biggest property, the one with the reservoir. That fed his irrigation systems. "You want to buy my land?" Caroline said flatly. It wasn't a question, not exactly. Graham finally took a seat on the porch swing, the wood creaking under his weight. "I'm here to propose a solution that could benefit us both." Caroline leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. "I'm listening." "Your farm sits on a critical water source that feeds into my main reservoir," Graham explained. "There's a land commission meeting in 3 weeks. Westland Development is making a push to buy up several properties in the area for a new shopping complex. And my land would be part of that?" Graham nodded. "If they get your property, they'll have access to redirect the water. My southern fields would be devastated." Caroline couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped her lips. "So you're worried about your crops while I'm about to lose my home?" "The home my great-grandfather built." For the first time, Graham's composed expression faltered. "That's why I'm here. I have a proposition that would allow you to keep your home and your land." "What kind of proposition?" Graham took a deep breath. "A marriage of convenience." Caroline stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "If we were married, I could clear your debts, stop the foreclosure, and keep the land in your family name. In return, you would stand with me at the commission meeting as my wife. The Walsh name still carries weight in this community. Together we'd be a united front against the development." Caroline was speechless. The man she barely knew beyond his reputation was suggesting they get married, like it was just another business transaction. "You can't be serious," she finally managed. "I'm always serious, Ms. Walsh," Graham replied. "This arrangement would benefit us both. You keep your farm and home, your mother continues receiving the medical care she needs, and I protect my water access." At the mention of her mother, Caroline felt a painful twist in her chest. Ellen Walsh had been in the county's best nursing home since her stroke 3 months ago, a place Caroline could no longer afford. "How do you know about my mother?" "As I said, in small towns, nothing stays private," Caroline finished for him. She pushed away from the railing and paced the worn wooden boards of the porch. And how long would this marriage last? Until the commission rules on the development proposal. A year at most. Graham stood up, straightening his jacket. You'd have your own space at my house. This would be a business arrangement, nothing more. Caroline laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really think people would believe we suddenly fell in love and got married? People believe what they want to believe. Graham reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. This contains the details of what I'm offering, including how I would handle your debts and your mother's care. Take some time to think about it. He placed the envelope on the small table next to the swing. I'll need your answer by the end of the week. As he turned to leave, Caroline called after him. Why me? Why not just buy another piece of land with a good water source? Graham paused at the steps. Because land with reliable water is increasingly rare, and because the Walsh farm has been in your family for generations. I respect that kind of legacy. With that, he walked back to his car, leaving Caroline standing on the porch, the envelope seeming to burn a hole in the table beside her. Inside the farmhouse, the phone rang. Caroline rushed inside to answer it. Ms. Walsh? The formal voice belonged to Mr. Brennan, her bank manager. I'm calling about your extension request. Caroline gripped the phone tighter. Yes? I'm afraid we can't grant any more extensions. The foreclosure proceedings will begin next Monday. After hanging up, Caroline sank into a kitchen chair, her father's voice echoing in her memory. This land is our heart, Caro. As long as we have it, we have everything that matters. She reached for the envelope Graham had left, her hands shaking, slightly as she opened it. Inside was a detailed contract, along with a cashier's check that would cover all her debts with money to spare. 2 days later, Caroline sat in her truck outside the imposing gates of the Hale estate. She had spent hours thinking about Graham's proposal, weighing her options, and crying into her pillow when she thought about what her father would say if he knew she was considering marrying a stranger to save the farm. But in the end, it came. Down to one thing. She had promised her father she would take care of the farm and her mother, and right now this was the only way to keep that promise. The gates opened automatically as she approached. The long driveway led to a large, elegant house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Nothing like her simple farmhouse with its creaking floors and faded wallpaper. Graham was waiting for her on the front steps. He wore casual clothes today, jeans and a button-up shirt, but somehow still looked formal and distant. You've made a decision, he said as she got out of her truck. Caroline nodded, clutching her purse tightly. Yes, I'll marry you, Mr. Hale, but I have conditions of my own. A flicker of surprise crossed Graham's face. I'm listening. The farm stays in my name only. I want that in writing. And I'll live there, not here. I'll attend whatever social functions you need me at, and I'll go to the commission meeting, but otherwise my life stays mine. Graham considered this for a moment. That's acceptable, except for one thing. For this to look real, you'd need to live here, at least part-time, especially in the beginning. Caroline hadn't expected that. Why? Because married couples live together, Ms. Walsh. If we're going to convince people this is real, we need to at least appear to be building a life together. The thought of living in this enormous house with a man she barely knew made Caroline's stomach knot with anxiety. 3 nights a week, she counted. The rest of the time I stay at the farm. Graham nodded. Agreed. And please, if we're to be married, you should call me Graham. Caroline, she offered in return. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, before Graham gestured toward the house. Would you like to see inside? It would be your home too, after all. The inside of the Hale house was as impressive as the outside. Spacious rooms with high ceilings and expensive furniture that looked like it had never been used. It felt more like a museum than a home. It's very nice, Caroline said, feeling completely out of place in her worn jeans and flannel shirt. It's too big for one person, Graham admitted, leading her through to a sun-filled kitchen that was spotlessly clean. But it was my mother's pride and joy. She loved entertaining. It was the first personal detail Graham had shared, and Caroline found herself curious to know more. Your mother, is she? She passed away 5 years ago, Graham said, his voice softening slightly. Cancer. I'm sorry, Caroline said, meaning it. Losing a parent changes everything. Graham's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, something passed between them, a shared understanding of loss. The moment was broken when Graham's phone rang. He excused himself to take the call, and Caroline wandered to the large window overlooking the back garden. Beautiful and perfectly maintained, but lacking the warmth and character of her wildflower-filled yard at the farm. Graham returned a few minutes later. "That was my lawyer. He can have the marriage license paperwork ready by tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Caroline's heart raced. "That's so fast." "Time is of the essence," Graham reminded her. "The commission meeting is in less than 3 weeks, and the bank is starting foreclosure on Monday." Reality crashed back in. This wasn't a normal engagement or marriage. This was a business deal, a contract to save her farm and his water access. "Right," Caroline nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Tomorrow it is." The next day they were married in a quick civil ceremony at the courthouse, with only the judge and Graham's lawyer as witnesses. Caroline wore the nicest dress she owned, a simple blue dress she usually saved for church, and Graham wore another perfectly tailored suit. As they exchanged the simple gold bands Graham had purchased, Caroline tried not to think about how she had once dreamed of a very different wedding, one with love and promise, not business terms and conditions. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the judge declared, closing his book with a thump that seemed to echo in Caroline's chest. "You may kiss the bride." Caroline's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't thought about this part. Graham seemed equally caught off guard, but he leaned forward and placed a quick formal kiss on her lips. It lasted less than a second, but Caroline felt a strange flutter in her stomach. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Graham's hand lightly resting on her back, Caroline caught sight of Marge Peterson from the local diner staring at them in shock. News would spread through town like wildfire. "Mrs. Hale," Graham said as he opened the car door for her, "are you ready for your new life?" Caroline met his gaze, searching for any hint of warmth or reassurance, but his expression remained as unreadable as ever. "It's still Caroline," she replied, sliding into the passenger seat of his expensive car. "And this isn't a new life. It's a temporary arrangement, remember?" Graham nodded, his expression unchanged. "Of course. Just an arrangement." As they drove away from the courthouse, Caroline looked out the window at the familiar streets of the town she'd lived in all her life. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. She had just married a stranger to save her family's farm, and despite what she had told Graham, this was a new life, one with rules she didn't know and consequences she couldn't predict. The gold band on her finger caught the sunlight, seeming to mock her with its shine and permanence. What had she gotten herself into? The next morning, Caroline woke up in an unfamiliar bed. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then, it all came rushing back. The wedding, the papers she'd signed, the gold band now sitting heavy on her finger. She was in one of the guest rooms at Graham's house. Her house too, she supposed, at least technically. The room was beautiful, with expensive linens and a view of the manicured gardens, but it felt nothing like home. Caroline got dressed quickly in jeans and a simple blouse, the few clothes she'd brought with her, and made her way downstairs. She found Graham in the kitchen, already dressed in a suit and reading something on his tablet while sipping coffee. "Good morning," she said awkwardly, hovering in the doorway. Graham looked up. "Good morning, there's coffee in the pot. Cups are in the cabinet to the left of the sink." "Thank you." Caroline poured herself a cup, noticing how even the coffee mugs looked expensive and unused. "Do you always dress so formally for breakfast?" "I have meetings in town this morning," Graham replied, his attention back on his tablet. "Feel free to help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Mrs. Rivera comes to clean on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She can show you around if you need anything." Caroline nodded, wondering if their entire marriage would consist of these polite, distant exchanges. "I'd like to go check on the farm this afternoon." "Of course. Your truck is in the garage. Take whatever time you need." An awkward silence fell between them as Caroline sipped her coffee, feeling like a guest rather than a wife. "The bank called yesterday," Graham said after a moment. "All your debts have been settled." Relief washed over Caroline. "Thank you. I know this is just business for you, but it means everything to me." Something flickered across Graham's face. So quickly, Caroline almost missed it. "It's the agreement we made," he said, standing up and gathering his things. "I have your name added to all the household accounts. Mrs. Rivera can help you with anything you need to purchase. I don't need to buy anything, Caroline said quickly. Graham paused at the door. We'll be attending the Harvest Gala at the country club on Saturday. You might want something appropriate to wear. With that, he was gone, leaving Caroline alone in the massive kitchen, wondering what exactly appropriate meant to someone like Graham Hale. Later that afternoon, Caroline drove her old truck down the familiar dirt road to the Walsh farm. As soon as she stepped out, the scent of hay and earth wrapped around her like a hug. This was home, every weathered board, every creaking step, every wildflower growing along the fence line. She walked through each room, touching the worn furniture that had belonged to her parents and grandparents. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, yet somehow it all felt different, like she was a visitor now instead of the owner. As she checked on the few animals she kept, chickens, her old horse Buster, and her father's dog Blue, Caroline's phone rang. It was Susan from the nursing home where her mother stayed. Caroline, I just heard the news. You married Graham Hale? Why didn't you tell us? Caroline winced. News traveled fast in small towns. It all happened very quickly, she said. Not sure how much to share. Well, it's wonderful news. And Mr. Hale has already arranged to upgrade your mother's care package. She'll be moved to a private suite tomorrow. Caroline felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected Graham to handle that so quickly, or thoughtfully. That's great, Susan. Thank you for letting me know. After hanging up, Caroline sat on the porch steps, Blue resting his head on her lap. Graham had kept his word. Her debts were paid, the farm was safe, and her mother was getting better care. That's what mattered, wasn't it? Not the strangeness of living in that big house with a man who treated their marriage like a business merger. The sound of a car coming up the driveway pulled Caroline from her thoughts. A familiar red pickup truck appeared, and her heart skipped a beat. Mark Stevens. Mark had been her high school sweetheart, the man she'd once thought she would marry. Until he left town 10 years ago to chase bigger dreams, breaking her heart in the process. She hadn't seen him in years. "Caro!" he called out, jumping from his truck with the easy confidence she remembered so well. At 40, Mark was still handsome, with laugh lines around his eyes and the same charming smile. "I heard the craziest thing in town today." Caroline stood up, suddenly conscious of the gold band on her finger. "Hello, Mark. What brings you back to Riverdale?" "Dad's not doing well. I came back to help with the store." Mark stepped closer, his eyes fixed on her ring. "So it's true then? You married Graham Hale? The Graham Hale who barely speaks to anyone, and lives in that mausoleum on the hill." The description of Graham's house as a mausoleum was so accurate that Caroline almost smiled. "Yes, it's true. We got married yesterday." Mark shook his head in disbelief. "How? When? Last I heard, you two didn't even know each other." "It's complicated." Caroline didn't know how to explain a marriage that existed only on paper. "Must be," Mark said, studying her face. "You don't seem like a woman who just married for love." His words hit too close to home, and Caroline felt her defenses rise. "You don't know anything about my life anymore, Mark. You gave up that right when you left." Mark had the grace to look ashamed. "You're right. I'm sorry." He gestured toward the farm. "At least I can see the old place is still standing. I was worried when I heard about your dad passing. I always meant to come back for the funeral." "But you didn't," Caroline said quietly. "No, I didn't." Mark sighed. "Look, I know I have no right to ask, but can we catch up sometime? As old friends?" Before Caroline could answer, another vehicle pulled into the driveway, Graham's black SUV. She felt a strange mix of relief and tension as he stepped out, his expression unreadable as always. "Caroline," he said, walking up to join them, "I thought I might find you here." "Graham," she replied, surprised by his appearance. "This is Mark Stevens. We grew up together." "Mark, this is Graham." "Her husband," Graham added, extending his hand to Mark. "Nice to meet you." The tension in the air was palpable as the two men shook hands, sizing each other up. Caroline felt caught between her past and her present, neither of which felt quite real. "I was just leaving," Mark said, backing toward his truck. "Good to see you, Caro. Maybe we can catch up another time." As Mark drove away, Caroline turned to Graham. "What are you doing here?" "I finished my meetings early and thought you might need help at the farm." It was the first thoughtful gesture he'd shown, and it caught Caroline off guard. "That's nice of you, thank you." Graham looked around the property, taking in the weathered barn, the small garden, and the faded farmhouse. "This place means a lot to you." It wasn't a question, but Caroline answered anyway. "It's my home. It's been in my family for generations." Graham nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I understand that. The Hale farm has been in my family for just as long. Different scale, same roots." It was the most personal thing he'd said to her, and Caroline found herself looking at him with new interest. "Would you like a tour? It's not much compared to your place, but I'd like that," Graham said, and for the first time Caroline saw a genuine smile cross his face. It transformed him, making him look younger and more approachable. Caroline showed Graham around the farm, the barn where she kept old Buster, the chicken coop her father had built, the small workshop where he used to fix equipment. Graham listened, attentively, asking questions that showed he understood farm life better than she'd expected. "Your father was clever with his irrigation system," Graham commented as they walked the property line. "He maximized every drop of water." "He had to," Caroline replied. "We never had the resources to do things the easy way. It was always make do or do without." Graham stopped at the old gate that separated their properties, the metal hinges squeaking, in the breeze. "That's a perspective I could learn from," he said quietly. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, Caroline found herself relaxing in Graham's company for the first time. He wasn't as cold as she'd thought, just reserved, careful with his words and actions. "We should get back," Graham said eventually. "It's getting late." The reminder that back now meant his house, their house, brought Caroline sharply back to reality. This wasn't two neighbors getting to know each other. This was a business arrangement with very clear terms. The drive back to the Hale estate was quiet, but not as uncomfortable as it might have been that morning. When they arrived, dinner was waiting for them. Mrs. Rivera had prepared something before leaving for the day. "You don't have to cook?" Caroline asked as they sat at the large dining table. "I rarely have time," Graham admitted, "and I'm not particularly skilled at it." "I could cook sometimes," Caroline offered. "It seems wrong to have Mrs. Rivera prepare meals when I'm perfectly capable." Graham looked surprised by the offer. "If you'd like to, the kitchen is yours to use." They ate in relative silence, but Caroline noticed Graham watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was curiosity in his gaze, perhaps even a hint of admiration. After dinner, Graham excused himself to his home office, and Caroline wandered through the house, trying to get her bearings. The place was beautiful but sterile, like no one really lived there. No personal photos, no mementos, nothing out of place. In the living room, she found a bookshelf filled with classics. Caroline ran her fingers along the spines, pulling out a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Unlike the rest of the house, this book showed signs of use. Dog-eared pages, a cracked spine. "That was my mother's favorite." Caroline turned to find Graham standing in the doorway, his jacket removed and sleeves rolled up, the most casual she'd seen him. "You've read it?" she asked, surprised. "Many times." Graham stepped into the room. "My mother insisted. She said I needed to understand that first impressions aren't always correct." Caroline smiled, looking down at the book in her hands. "My mom loved it too. She used to say that Elizabeth Bennet had just the right amount of stubbornness." Graham gestured to the book. "You're welcome to borrow it." "Thank you." Caroline placed it back on the shelf. "Maybe another time." An awkward silence fell between them, the momentary connection fading as quickly as it had appeared. "I should get some rest," Caroline said finally. "Good night, Graham." "Good night, Caroline." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Caroline found herself thinking about the brief glimpses she'd seen of a different Graham today. One who understood the value of family land, who had read Pride and Prejudice multiple times, who had come to the farm just to help her. Maybe there was more to her new husband than she'd initially thought, but then she remembered why they were married in the first place. A business arrangement, nothing more. Getting emotionally involved would only complicate things and lead to heartache when their arrangement ended. The next morning, Caroline woke early, her farmer's habits impossible to break. The house was quiet as she made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise, she found Graham already there, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, making coffee. "You're up early," she said, hesitating in the doorway. "I could say the same about you," Graham replied, offering her a mug of coffee. "Cream? Sugar?" "Black is fine, thank you." Graham nodded, handing her the mug. "I'm not going into the office today. I thought I might help you with whatever you need to do at the farm." Caroline nearly choked on her coffee. "You want to help at the farm?" "Is that so surprising? Honestly?" "Yes." Caroline studied him over the rim of her mug. "You're the CEO of Hale Farming Enterprises. Don't you have people to do the actual farming for you?" A shadow crossed Graham's face. "I started in the fields, you know, before the business expanded, before my father turned us into a corporation. I miss it sometimes, the simplicity of working the land yourself." It was another glimpse of the man behind the formal exterior, and Caroline found herself increasingly curious. "Well, I do need to fix the chicken coop roof, and Buster's stall could use some work." "Then let's do it," Graham said, with a decisiveness that seemed to surprise even him. They spent the day at the Walsh farm, working side by side. Caroline was impressed by Graham's knowledge and willingness to get his hands dirty. He fixed the squeaky gate at the entrance without being asked, the task seeming to give him genuine satisfaction. "You're good at this," Caroline commented as they repaired the chicken coop roof together. "Don't sound so surprised," Graham replied, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. "I told you I grew up doing this." "What happened?" Caroline asked before she could stop herself. "Why did you stop?" Graham was quiet for so long that Caroline thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. "My father happened. He had bigger plans for the Hale name than just being successful farmers. He wanted an empire." Graham hammered a nail with more force than necessary. "My brother Daniel was supposed to run it with me, but he died in an accident 15 years ago." "I'm so sorry," Caroline said softly, understanding now why Graham seemed to carry such weight on his shoulders. "After that, it was just me, and my father made it clear that the Hale legacy was my responsibility now." Graham looked out over the fields, his expression distant. "He passed away 10 years ago, but sometimes I still feel like I'm trying to live up to his expectations." Caroline thought about her own father, how different he had been, encouraging her to find her own path, even as he hoped she would love the farm as much as he did. "It's hard to feel like you're carrying someone else's dreams," she said carefully. Graham met her eyes, surprise and recognition in his gaze. "Yes, exactly." They worked in companionable silence after that, and Caroline found herself sneaking glances at Graham when he wasn't looking. There was something appealing about seeing this polished businessman up to his elbows in dirt and repair work, his face relaxed and focused. As they finished for the day, Graham surprised her again by suggesting they eat dinner at the small diner in town. "People will see us," Caroline pointed out. "That's the point, isn't it?" Graham replied. "For people to see us as a couple." The diner was busy when they arrived, and a hush fell over the room as they walked in together. Caroline felt every eye on them as Graham led her to a booth, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Marge, the waitress who had seen them at the courthouse, approached with a beaming smile. "Well, if it isn't the newlyweds, what can I get you 2 lovebirds?" Graham ordered the special without looking at the menu, and Caroline did the same, trying to act natural despite feeling like she was on stage. "People are staring," she whispered across the table. "Let them," Graham said, reaching across to take her hand in his. The gesture was clearly for show, but it still sent an unexpected warmth through Caroline. It's not every day the town's most eligible bachelor gets married. His tone was light, almost teasing, and Caroline found herself smiling despite her nerves. "Is that what they called you? The most eligible bachelor?" "Among other things," Graham replied, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. "Most of them not as flattering, cold, distant, the Iceman of Hale Enterprises." Caroline studied him, realizing how much his reputation must have isolated him. "And did that bother you? What people said?" Graham shrugged, but she could see it had. It served a purpose. People don't try to get close when they think you're made of ice. And are you? Made of ice? His eyes met hers, something intense and unreadable in them. What do you think, Caroline? Before she could answer, a shadow fell over their table. Caroline looked up to see Mark standing there, his expression hard as he looked at their joined hands. Quite a change from yesterday, Mark commented. You two seem cozy. Graham's hand tightened around Caroline's. Newlyweds usually are. The tension between the two men was thick enough to cut with a knife. Caroline felt caught in the middle, unsure how to defuse the situation. Mark was just leaving, she said pointedly. Mark held Graham's gaze for a moment longer before nodding. Congratulations on your marriage, Caro. I hope he makes you happy. The doubt in his voice was clear. After Mark left, Caroline pulled her hand from Graham's. You didn't have to do that. Do what? Act all possessive. Mark is just an old friend. Graham's expression cooled. An old friend who clearly wants to be more, and possessiveness had nothing to do with it. We need to be convincing, remember? That's the arrangement. The reminder stung more than it should have. Right, the arrangement. Their food arrived, and they ate in awkward silence, the easy companionship of the day evaporating. Caroline remembered why this marriage existed, not for connection or understanding, but for land and water rights, for business. Back at the Hale house that night, Caroline couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the different sides of Graham she'd seen today, the capable farmer, the lonely businessman, the possessive husband playing a role. Which one was real, and why did it matter to her so much? The next few days fell into an unexpected routine. Graham continued to help at the farm in the mornings, fixing things Caroline had been putting off for months. In the afternoons, he would return to his office work, while Caroline visited her mother at the nursing home. Ellen Walsh was thrilled about Caroline's marriage, though confused by the suddenness of it. I didn't even know you were dating anyone, Ellen said, patting Caroline's hand. And now you're married to Graham Hale. He must be quite the charmer to sweep you off your feet so quickly. Caroline forced a smile. It all happened very fast. Is he? How good to you? Her mother asked, suddenly serious. Are you happy, sweetheart? The question caught Caroline off guard. Was she happy? The arrangement with Graham had solved her financial problems and saved the farm. That should be enough. But her mother was asking about something deeper, about love and connection, the things marriages were supposed to be built on. He's not what I expected, Caroline answered truthfully. There's more to him than people see. Ellen squeezed her hand. That's a start. The rest will come with time. Caroline wasn't so sure. In less than 3 weeks, they would attend the Land Commission meeting. Once that was over, how long would their arrangement last, and why did the thought of it ending make her feel so unsettled? On Saturday morning, Caroline drove into town to find a dress for the Harvest Gala. She had never attended the country club event before. It was for the wealthy people in town, not farmers struggling to make ends meet. The only dress shop in Riverdale was small but had a decent selection. Caroline was browsing through the racks when a voice behind her made her jump. You'll need something better than that for the gala. She turned to find Olivia Bennett, the bank manager's daughter, and Graham's ex-girlfriend, according to town gossip. Olivia was everything Caroline wasn't. Polished, sophisticated, perfectly put together. I'm sure I'll find something suitable, Caroline replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. Olivia's smile didn't reach her eyes. The whole town is talking about you and Graham. Such a surprising match. The implication was clear. What would someone like Graham Hale want with a simple farm girl? Sometimes life is surprising, Caroline said, turning back to the rack. Very surprising, Olivia agreed, stepping closer, especially since Graham and I were discussing reconciliation just a month ago. Caroline's hand froze on a dress hanger. I find that hard to believe. Do you? Olivia's perfectly manicured nail tapped against her chin. You barely know him. What makes you think you understand what Graham wants or needs? The question hit too close to Caroline's own doubts. She and Graham had an arrangement, nothing more. He had never pretended otherwise. If you'll excuse me, Caroline said, moving toward the door. I need to be going. Olivia's voice followed her. The gala will be interesting. So many people curious. About Graham Hale's new bride. I do hope you don't disappoint him. Caroline hurried to her truck, her hands shaking slightly as she started the engine. The encounter had left her feeling unsettled and out of place. What was she doing, pretending to be Graham Hale's wife? They came from different worlds. Eventually, the arrangement would end, and Graham would go back to his real life, perhaps even to women like Olivia. The thought bothered her more than it should have. When she returned to the house, Graham was in his office on a business call. Caroline slipped past quietly, not wanting to disturb him. She would have to find something in her own wardrobe for the gala, something that wouldn't embarrass Graham too badly. Later that afternoon, as Caroline was trying to make sense of her limited wardrobe options, there was a knock at her bedroom door. "Caroline," Graham's voice came through the door. "May I come in?" "Yes," she called, quickly closing her closet. Graham entered, carrying a large box with a department store logo Caroline recognized from the city. "This came for you." "For me?" "I didn't order anything." "I took the liberty," Graham said, placing the box on the bed. "For tonight." Caroline stared at the box, then at Graham. "You bought me a dress?" It seemed practical. If you don't like it, you don't have to wear it. Curious despite herself, Caroline opened the box. Inside was a beautiful emerald green dress, simple but elegant, with a classic cut that wouldn't go out of style. It was exactly the type of dress she would have chosen for herself if money were no object. "How did you know my size?" she asked, lifting the dress from its tissue paper. Mrs. Rivera helped. "Do you like it?" Caroline ran her hand over the silky fabric. "It's beautiful, thank you." Graham nodded, already backing toward the door. "The car will be ready at 7. After he left, Caroline held the dress against herself. Looking in the mirror, the color complemented her eyes and dark hair perfectly. It was a thoughtful gift, one that showed Graham had actually considered what would suit her, not just what would look appropriate on his wife. Another small glimpse of the man behind the businessman's mask. That evening, Caroline took extra time, getting ready, piling her hair into a simple updo, and adding the pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. When she finally descended the stairs in the green dress and a pair of simple heels, Graham was waiting in the foyer. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, he seemed speechless. Caroline felt a blush rise to her cheeks under his intense gaze. "You look beautiful," Graham said finally, his voice softer than usual. "Thank you," Caroline replied, suddenly shy. "The dress is perfect." Graham offered his arm, and Caroline took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through his suit jacket. As they walked to the car, she found herself wondering again which version of her husband was the real one. The cold businessman, or the man who had just looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. And she wondered, not for the first time, if she was starting to care about the answer more than she should. The Harvest Gala was exactly as Caroline had imagined, elegant, formal, and filled with the wealthiest families in the county. As Graham led her into the country club ballroom, she felt every eye turned toward them. The room buzzed with whispers, and Caroline tightened her grip on Graham's arm. "Everyone's staring," she murmured. "Let them," Graham replied, his hand covering hers reassuringly. "You look beautiful. Hold your head high." His quiet confidence steadied her nerves. Caroline straightened her shoulders and smiled as Graham guided her through the crowd, stopping occasionally to introduce her to business associates and friends. "And this is my wife, Caroline," he would say, the words still sounding strange to both of them. George Bennett, the bank manager and Olivia's father, approached with a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Graham? And the new Mrs. Hale? What?" "There's surprising development. Sometimes the best things in life are unexpected," Graham replied smoothly, his arm sliding around Caroline's waist in a gesture that seemed protective rather than possessive. Before George could respond, a tall, distinguished man with silver hair joined their circle. "Graham Hale, you sly dog. You get married without telling your godfather?" Graham's face softened into a genuine smile. "Uncle Walter, I didn't know you'd be here tonight." Walter Thompson embraced Graham warmly before turning his attention to Caroline. "And this must be the bride I've been hearing about." "Walter Thompson, my dear. I've known this boy since he was in diapers." Caroline found herself instantly liking Walter's warmth and straightforward manner. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Thompson." "Walter, please, and I want to hear how you two met. No one seems to know the story." Caroline froze, realizing they had never discussed their cover story. She looked at Graham, hoping he had something prepared. "Actually," Graham said, his eyes meeting Caroline's, "we've known each other for years. Our properties border each other, but we only reconnected recently, when Caroline came to discuss water access rights." Walter raised an eyebrow. "From water rights to wedding bells, that must have been some discussion." It was. Graham's gaze remained fixed on Caroline, a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "I realized I'd been missing what was right in front of me all along." The sincerity in his voice made Caroline's heart flutter unexpectedly. For a moment, she could almost believe their marriage was real. The moment was broken by Olivia's arrival, stunning in a red dress that seemed designed to draw attention. "Graham," she purred, ignoring Caroline completely, "you've been avoiding me since your unexpected nuptials." "Olivia," Graham acknowledged with a nod, his arm tightening around Caroline. "You remember my wife, Caroline? How could I forget?" Olivia's smile was sharp as glass. "Though I'm still trying to understand how this happened so quickly, one might almost think there was another reason for such a hasty wedding." The implication hung in the air. Caroline felt her cheeks burning as whispers spread through the nearby guests. To her surprise, Graham laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "If you're asking if Caroline is pregnant, the answer is no, though not for lack of trying." Caroline nearly choked on her champagne as several people within earshot gasped or chuckled. Graham's hand rubbed small circles on her back, both comforting and oddly intimate. "I apologize for my goddaughter's manners," Walter said, giving Olivia a pointed look. "Some people forget that true happiness deserves celebration, not speculation." Olivia's smile tightened, but before she could respond, the band began to play a slow waltz. "If you'll excuse us," Graham said, taking Caroline's hand, "I'd like to dance with my wife." He led her to the dance floor, one hand at her waist and the other holding hers as they began to move to the music. "I'm sorry about that," Graham said quietly. "Olivia has always enjoyed creating drama." "Were you and she ever—" Caroline couldn't help asking. "Briefly years ago," Graham admitted. "It didn't work out." Caroline nodded, still processing his earlier comment. "That was quite a statement you made back there." A faint smile touched Graham's lips. "It served its purpose. Olivia won't spread pregnancy rumors now." "No, she'll spread different ones," Caroline pointed out, aware of the eyes still watching them. Graham pulled her slightly closer, his voice dropping lower. "Let them talk. It doesn't matter what they think as long as we know the truth." But what was the truth, Caroline wondered as they moved across the dance floor. The way Graham was looking at her now, holding her as if she were precious, was that real or just part of their act? As the music continued, Caroline gradually relaxed into Graham's arms. He was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her confidently around the floor. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to forget about their arrangement and simply enjoy the moment, the beautiful music, the warmth of Graham's hand at her waist, the way his eyes never left hers. When the dance ended, Caroline was breathless, and not just from the exertion. Something was changing between them, something neither of them had planned for. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, more dancing and stolen glances between her and Graham. By the time they left, Caroline felt as though she had stepped into someone else's life, someone whose husband looked at her with warm eyes and whose touch sent shivers down her spine. The drive home was quiet, both of them lost in their thoughts. When they reached the house, Graham walked her to the door of her bedroom, an unexpected gesture of old-fashioned courtesy. "Thank you for tonight," Caroline said softly, finding herself reluctant to say goodnight. "You made me feel like I belonged." "There." Graham studied her face, his expression unusually open. "You did belong. You were the most genuine person in that room." His compliment warmed her from the inside out. "Good night, Graham." "Good night, Caroline." As she closed her bedroom door, Caroline leaned against it, her heart racing with emotions she hadn't expected to feel: confusion, attraction, and a growing affection for the complex man she had married for all the wrong reasons. The following week brought a new routine. Graham continued helping at the farm in the mornings, and Caroline began cooking dinner for them in the evenings. They talked more, learning small details about each other that friends might know. Graham's preference for black coffee, Caroline's love of thunderstorms, his allergies to strawberries, her habit of humming while she worked. Each new piece of fee. Information made Graham seem more human, less like the cold businessman everyone else saw. Caroline found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the quiet moments when his guard would drop, and she'd glimpse the man behind the careful exterior. On Wednesday morning, Caroline went to visit her mother at the nursing home. Ellen was having a good day, her mind clear as she asked Caroline about married life. "He seems like a good man," Ellen said, patting her daughter's hand. "The way he looks at you, it reminds me of how your father used to look at me." Caroline shifted uncomfortably. "It's complicated, Mom." Ellen's eyes sharpened. "What's complicated about it? Either he loves you or he doesn't." The word love made Caroline's heart skip. She and Graham had never spoken of love. Their arrangement was about business, about saving her farm and his water rights. Yet in the past weeks, something had grown between them that she couldn't define. "We're still getting to know each other," Caroline said carefully. Ellen studied her daughter's face. "You're falling for him, aren't you?" Caroline looked away, unable to deny it. The truth was, she was beginning to care for Graham in a way that went far beyond their arrangement. His quiet strength, his unexpected moments of tenderness, the way he listened when she spoke, all of it had worked its way into her heart, despite her best efforts to keep their relationship strictly business. "It doesn't matter," Caroline said. Finally, "Our marriage it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Ellen pressed. Caroline couldn't tell her mother the truth, that her marriage was a contract with an expiration date. Instead, she stood up, forcing a smile. "I should go. I promised Graham I'd make pot roast tonight." As she left the nursing home, Caroline's phone rang. It was Graham. "Caroline," his voice sounded tense. "Can you meet me at the farm? There's something you need to see. Is everything all right?" "Just meet me there," Graham said before hanging up. 20 minutes later, Caroline pulled up to the Walsh farm to find Graham's SUV and another vehicle, a white truck with Westland Development printed on the side. Her stomach knotted with anxiety as she hurried toward the barn, where she could hear voices. She found Graham standing with a man in an expensive suit, tension evident in Graham's stance. "Caroline," Graham said when he saw her, relief flashing across his face. "This is Robert Preston from Westland Development. He was just explaining why he was on your property without permission." Preston had the polished smile of a practiced salesman. "Mrs. Hale, I apologize for the intrusion. I was simply assessing the property for our records. As I was telling your husband, Westland is prepared to make a very generous offer for this land." "This land isn't for sale," Caroline said firmly. Preston's smile didn't waver. "Everyone has a price, Mrs. Hale, and given the condition of this farm, I think our offer would be quite appealing." Graham stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Mr. Preston was just leaving." The developer nodded, still smiling. "Think about it. The commission meeting is in 10 days. Once they approve our project, property values in this area will change dramatically, and not in your favor." After Preston left, Caroline felt her knees weaken. She sank onto an old wooden bench outside the barn, trying to process what had just happened. "How did he get onto the property?" she asked. Graham sat beside her, anger still evident in his rigid posture. "I found him taking soil samples near the eastern boundary. He claims the gate was open." "It's never open," Caroline said, her voice rising. "I always lock it." "I know." Graham took her hand, his touch steadying her. "Preston is pushing boundaries to see how far he can go, but he won't get this land, Caroline, I promise you that." The determination in his voice made her look up at him. "Why does this matter so much to you? I understand protecting your water rights, but this seems personal." Graham was quiet for a moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. "Because I know what it means to have something that's been in your family for generations, and because—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Because that was our agreement. Caroline felt a stab of disappointment at his words. For a moment she had thought he might say something else, something about her, not just their arrangement. Right, the agreement. She pulled her hand away, standing up. The commission meeting is in 10 days. After that, she couldn't finish the sentence. After that, their arrangement would essentially be over. The thought left an empty feeling in her chest. After that, we can discuss next steps, Graham said, his voice carefully neutral. Next steps. Such a businesslike way to refer to the end of their marriage. Caroline nodded, turning away so he wouldn't see the tears threatening in her eyes. I think I'll stay here tonight, she said. There are some things I need to take care of. Graham looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he nodded. Of course, I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, Caroline agreed, not trusting herself to say more. After Graham left, Caroline walked through the silent farmhouse, touching familiar objects, trying to ground herself. When had things become so complicated? She had entered this marriage with clear eyes, a business arrangement to save her farm. She wasn't supposed to develop feelings for Graham. She wasn't supposed to dread the day their arrangement would end. But she had, and she did. The next morning, Caroline was feeding the chickens when she heard a car coming up the driveway. Expecting Graham, she was surprised to see Mark's red pickup instead. Morning, Caro, Mark called, carrying a paper bag. Brought you some of those cinnamon rolls you always liked from the bakery. Caroline forced a smile. That's nice of you, Mark. What brings you by so early? Wanted to catch you alone, Mark admitted, following her into the barn where she continued her chores. It's not easy to talk with your husband hovering over you like a watchdog. The description of Graham made Caroline frown. He's protective, not controlling, if you say so. Mark leaned against a stall door, watching her work. But the Caroline I knew would never have rushed into marriage with someone she barely knew. It makes me wonder what's really going on. Caroline kept her face carefully blank. People change, Mark. I'm not the same person you left behind 10 years ago. I know, Mark said softly, and I've regretted leaving every day since. His words hung in the air between them. Once hearing Mark say that would have meant everything to Caroline. Now it barely touched her. It's too late for that, she said, moving past him to grab fresh hay. Mark caught her arm gently. Is it? You can't tell me this marriage to Hale is real, Caro. Everyone in town is talking about how sudden it was. Right after your farm was about to be foreclosed on, suddenly you're married to the richest man around? It doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened. Caroline pulled away from his grip. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know you, Mark insisted. And I can see you're not happy. Whatever deal you made with him, it's not worth it. The farm isn't worth your life, Caro. That's where you're wrong, Caroline said, anger rising in her voice. This farm is my heritage, my home. You never understood that. You were so eager to leave, to find something better. Well, I stayed. I fought for this place, and I'll keep fighting for it. With Hale's money, Mark pointed out. Caroline's hand stung before she even realized she had slapped him. Mark stumbled back, shock written across his face. Get out, she said, her voice shaking, and don't come back. After Mark left, Caroline sank onto a hay bale, trembling with anger and confusion. Why had she reacted so strongly? Because Mark had come too close to the truth about her marriage arrangement, or because he had insulted Graham? The sound of Graham's SUV pulling up made Caroline quickly wipe away the tears she hadn't realized were falling. She wasn't ready to face him, not with her emotions so raw, but Graham found her anyway, his face concerned as he entered the barn. Caroline, are you all right? I saw Stevens leaving. I'm fine, she said automatically, turning away to hide her reddened eyes. Graham stepped closer, gently turning her to face him. You're not fine. What did he say to you? The genuine concern in Graham's voice broke something inside Caroline. He figured it out, about our arrangement. He said everyone in town is talking about how I only married you for your money, to save the farm. Graham's expression darkened. What else? It doesn't matter, Caroline said, moving toward the barn door. It's nothing I haven't already thought. Myself. Graham caught her hand, stopping her. It matters to me. Those 4 words spoken with such sincerity made Caroline look up at him. Something had changed in Graham's eyes. The careful distance was gone, replaced by an intensity that made her breath catch. "He said I wasn't happy," she admitted softly. "That this marriage isn't real." "And what did you say?" Graham asked, his voice low. Caroline couldn't look away from his gaze. "I told him he doesn't know anything about my marriage." "And does he?" Graham stepped closer, still holding her hand. "Know anything about our marriage?" The question seemed to hold more weight than its simple words suggested. Caroline felt her heart beating faster, aware of how close Graham was standing, of the warmth of his hand around hers. "No," she whispered. "He doesn't." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and feelings neither had acknowledged. Graham's free hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "Caroline," he began, but was interrupted by the sound of another vehicle coming up the driveway. They stepped apart quickly as Walter Thompson's car appeared. Graham's expression shifted back to his usual reserved mask, leaving Caroline wondering what he had been about to say. Walter greeted them cheerfully, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air. "Hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to see this farm I've been hearing about and to spend some time with my godson and his new bride." Graham recovered his composure quickly. "Of course not, Uncle Walter. We were just discussing some repairs for the barn." Walter looked around the property with appreciation. "Beautiful land. I can see why you fought to keep it, Caroline. Reminds me of the original Hale homestead before it became so industrialized." His words seemed to strike a chord with Graham, whose expression softened as he looked out over the fields. It does have that feeling. Walter insisted on taking them to lunch in town, and Caroline found herself genuinely enjoying his company. He told stories about Graham as a child that made her see her husband in a new light, the serious boy who had worked alongside his father and brother, who had loved the land before business took precedence. "He built the best treehouse you've ever seen," Walter recalled fondly. "Spent an entire summer on it, planning every detail. Always was methodical, even as a kid." Graham looked slightly embarrassed, but didn't stop his godfather's stories. Caroline realized that Walter was one of the few people who saw beyond Graham's business persona, who knew the man he had been, before responsibility and loss had shaped him into the reserved figure most people saw. After lunch, Walter insisted on seeing the inside of the farmhouse. As they walked through the rooms, his eyes took in the worn furniture and faded wallpaper, with none of the judgment Caroline had feared. "It's a real home," Walter commented. "Lived in, loved. You don't see that much anymore." In the living room, Walter stopped at a collection of family photos Caroline had arranged on the mantel. "Is this your father?" he asked, picking up a frame that showed James Walsh standing proudly beside his tractor. "Yes," Caroline said, warmth filling her voice. "That was taken the year before he died." Walter studied the photo with unusual interest. "James Walsh. I thought the name sounded familiar when Graham told me about your marriage. I believe I met your father once, many years ago." "Really?" Caroline was surprised. "Where?" "At a farming conference in the city. Must have been 20 years ago now. He had some innovative ideas about sustainable irrigation." Walter turned to Graham. "Actually, some of those same principles were incorporated into the Eastern Reservoir system on your property." Graham looked startled. "I didn't know that." Walter replaced the photo carefully. "There's a lot about the Hale operations you don't know, my boy. Your father wasn't always forthcoming about where his ideas came from." There was something in Walter's tone that made Caroline curious, but before she could ask more questions, Walter changed the subject, commenting on another photo. When Walter left later that afternoon, he embraced Caroline warmly. "You're good. For him," he whispered in her ear. "I haven't seen him this at peace in years." His words stayed with Caroline as she and Graham worked together to prepare dinner at the farmhouse, moving around the small kitchen with an ease that felt surprisingly domestic. "Your godfather is wonderful," Caroline commented as she chopped vegetables. Graham nodded, a fond smile touching his lips. "He's been more of a father to me than my own was, especially after Daniel died." "Tell me about your brother," Caroline said gently. It was the first time Graham had mentioned Daniel by name. Graham was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the cutting board. Daniel was everything I'm not. Outgoing, funny, the life of any room he entered. Everyone loved him instantly. Including you, Caroline observed. Especially me. Graham's voice softened with memory. He was 3 years older, but he never made me feel left out. We were going to run the farm together, the business side and the actual farming. He loved working the land, being outdoors. What happened? Caroline asked, though she suspected she knew. Tractor accident, Graham confirmed, pain evident in his voice even after 15 years. I was away at college. By the time I got home, he was gone. Caroline placed her hand over his on the cutting board. I'm so sorry, Graham. He turned his hand to clasp hers, the simple gesture full of meaning. After that, everything changed. My father couldn't bear to look at the fields anymore. He pushed harder into the business side. Acquisitions, processing plants, distribution. He pulled me out of college to learn the business. The actual farming became secondary. But not to you, Caroline said, understanding dawning. You still care about the land itself? Graham met her eyes, something vulnerable in his gaze. Yes, but I buried that part of myself for a long time. Until recently. The implication hung in the air between them. Caroline felt her heart race as Graham's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. Until I met you, he said finally, his voice low and certain. The admission changed something between them. As they finished making dinner together, Caroline felt a new awareness of Graham, of his presence in her kitchen, of the way his eyes followed her movements, of how natural it felt to be sharing this space with him. They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the fields gold. The conversation flowed easily between them, no longer the careful, polite exchanges of their early days together. Would you have left? Graham asked suddenly. If Mark had come back before all this happened, before the farm was in trouble, would you have gone with him? The question surprised Caroline, but she didn't need to think about her answer. No. I realized a long time ago that Mark and I wanted different things from life. He never understood why this place mattered so much to me. Graham nodded, his expression thoughtful. And now? If he asked you to leave with him today? Caroline turned to face Graham fully. Why are you asking me this? Because I need to know, Graham said simply. No, Caroline answered, holding his gaze. I wouldn't go with him. Not today, not ever. Relief flickered across Graham's face, followed by something deeper, more intense. Good. The single word contained such feeling that Caroline found herself breathless. They sat in silence as darkness fell, the space between them on the porch swing no longer feeling like a careful distance, but like an invitation. Later, as Graham prepared to leave for the night, his first time returning to his house alone since, they had begun staying at the farm together. Caroline walked him to his car. Will you come back tomorrow? She asked, suddenly reluctant to see him go. Graham looked down at her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. Yes, if you want me to. I do, Caroline said simply. Graham reached out, his fingers gently, brushing her cheek in a touch that felt like a promise. Then I'll be here. As she watched his taillights disappear down the driveway, Caroline acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with her husband, a man she had married for all the wrong reasons, who was slowly becoming the right one for all the right reasons. The question was, did he feel the same way? The next few days passed in a strange, sweet tension. Graham arrived each morning to help with the farm work, staying through dinner and into the evening. They talked for hours, sharing memories and dreams, discovering the people behind their carefully maintained facades. Caroline learned about Graham's passion for old tractors, his secret love of classic novels, his dream of someday restoring part of the Hale farm to its original state. In turn, she shared her own hopes to make the Walsh farm sustainable, to honor her father's legacy by keeping the land productive and healthy. The more they shared, the more the lines blurred between their arrangement and something real. Graham's touches lingered longer. His eyes held hers with growing intensity, and Caroline found herself constantly aware of him, his presence, his smile, the rare sound of his laughter. 4 days before the commission meeting, Graham arrived, with breakfast and coffee. As they sat on the porch enjoying the morning sunshine, Graham's phone rang. His expression darkened as he answered. "When?" he asked, his voice tense. "I see. Yes, I'll be there." After hanging up, he turned to Caroline. "That was my lawyer. Preston from Westland has requested a private meeting with the commission members today. He's trying to present his case before the public hearing." Caroline felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. Can he do that? Not legally, no. But Preston has connections, and he's not above bending rules. Graham stood up, his expression determined. "I need to go into town and make sure this doesn't happen behind closed doors. I'll come with you," Caroline said immediately. Graham looked surprised but nodded. "Thank you." At the county offices, they found Preston already deep in conversation with two commission members in the hallway. Graham approached, his demeanor shifting to the confident businessman Caroline had first met. "Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner." "Alvarez," he greeted them formally. "I hope Mr. Preston isn't attempting to circumvent proper procedure with a private meeting." Preston's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just catching up with old friends, Hale. Nothing improper about that." "Then you won't mind if my wife and I join the conversation," Graham said smoothly, his hand coming to rest at the small of Caroline's back. The commissioners looked uncomfortable, clearly aware of how the situation appeared. Wilson, a heavy-set man with a perpetual frown, cleared his throat. "No private meetings are scheduled, Graham. The commission will hear all sides at Monday's public hearing." "Excellent," Graham replied, his tone pleasant but firm. "We'll save our comments for then as well." Preston's smile tightened. "Your wife?" "Ah, yes, the hasty marriage that's had everyone talking. How convenient that you happened to marry the owner of the only property standing in the way of my development." Caroline felt Graham tense beside her. Before he could respond, she stepped forward. "Our marriage is not up for discussion, Mr. Preston. But I assure you my position on selling my family's land would be exactly the same, regardless of who I was married to." Preston looked at her with new interest. "Is that so, Mrs. Hale? Then perhaps we should discuss what your position might be if certain facts came to light." "What facts?" Caroline asked, her heart beginning to race. Preston glanced at the commissioners, then back to Graham and Caroline. "Perhaps this is a conversation best had in private. My office is just down the street." Graham's hand tightened protectively around Caroline's waist. "Anything you have to say, you can say here." "Very well." Preston straightened his tie, his expression smug. "I've been doing some research into the history of the Walsh farm, specifically into the circumstances under which your father acquired certain water rights, Mrs. Hale." Caroline frowned, confused. "My father didn't acquire any water rights. They came with the land." "Not originally," Preston contradicted. 40 years ago, those rights were part of the Hale property. They were transferred to your father under questionable circumstances." Graham's expression darkened. "What are you implying, Preston?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." Preston pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I have documents showing that Julian Hale, your father Graham, sold those rights to James Walsh for a fraction of their value. The question is, why would a ruthless businessman like Julian Hale practically give away valuable water rights to a struggling farmer?" Caroline looked at Graham, whose face had gone pale. "Graham? What is he talking about?" Before Graham could answer, Preston continued. "Unless, of course, there was something else going on, something that might invalidate both the original transfer and, by extension, your current claim to that land." The implication hung in the air, heavy and threatening. Caroline felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. What was Preston suggesting about her father? About Graham's father? "This meeting is over," Graham said firmly, taking Caroline's arm. "We'll see you at the public hearing, Preston. And if you spread unfounded accusations about either of our families, I'll have my lawyers bury you in lawsuits." As they walked quickly to Graham's car, Caroline's mind raced with questions. Graham, what was he talking about? Did your father really sell water rights to my dad? Graham's jaw was tense as he opened the car door for her. "I don't know. My father never mentioned it. But Preston is grasping at straws, trying to create doubt before the hearing." But there was something in Graham's voice, a hesitation, a note of uncertainty. that made Caroline wonder if he was telling her everything. They drove in tense silence back to the farm. As soon as they arrived, Graham headed straight for his car. "Where are you going?" Caroline asked, alarmed by his abrupt departure. "To find the truth," Graham replied, his expression determined. "I need to check the old records at the company headquarters. If there's anything to what Preston was saying, I'll find it." "I'm coming with you," Caroline insisted. Graham shook his head. "This is something I need to do alone, Caroline. I'll call you when I know more." As she watched him drive away, Caroline felt a chill of foreboding. Whatever Preston had discovered, it had clearly rattled Graham. And anything that could shake Graham's composure was something to worry about. The hours crawled by with no word from Graham. Caroline tried calling several times, but her calls went straight to voicemail. By evening, her worry had turned to anger. Whatever Graham had found, she deserved to know. This was her farm, her family's legacy at stake. Just as she was about to drive to the Hale offices herself, headlights appeared in the driveway. Caroline rushed onto the porch, relief washing over her at the sight of Graham's SUV, but her relief turned to concern when Graham emerged. He looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair repeatedly. "Graham, what happened? What did you find?" He walked slowly to the porch steps, his expression troubled. "We need to talk, Caroline. I found the files Preston was referring to." Inside the farmhouse, Graham spread several old documents on the kitchen table. Caroline saw her father's signature on several of them, alongside another signature she assumed was Julian Hale's. "These are water rights transfers from 1982, Graham explained, his voice strained. "My father did sell them to your father for a nominal amount, far below market value." "But why?" Caroline asked, scanning the documents. "Our families didn't even know each other." Graham hesitated, then pulled out another file. "There was a letter with the documents, from your father to mine." He handed it to Caroline, who recognized her father's handwriting immediately. The letter was brief but clear. "Julian, as agreed, I've kept my silence all these years. This transfer fulfills your part of our arrangement. I hope we can both find peace with the past." James Walsh. Caroline read the letter 3 times, trying to make sense of it. "What does this mean? What silence? What arrangement?" Graham sat heavily in a kitchen chair. "I don't know. There's nothing else in the files that explains it. But Preston was right about one thing. If there was some kind of improper agreement behind these transfers, it could potentially invalidate your claim to the water rights, and by extension, weaken our position at the hearing." Caroline felt the foundations of her world shaking. Her father had always been the most honest, straightforward man she knew. The idea that he might have been involved in something improper was impossible to accept. "We need to find out what this means," she said firmly. "There has to be someone who knows the history between our fathers." Graham nodded slowly. "Uncle Walter. He's known both families for decades. If anyone would know, it's him." The next morning, they drove to Walter's house in the city. The elderly man seemed surprised to see them on his doorstep, but welcomed them warmly. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" he asked as he led them into his study. Graham placed the documents and letter on Walter's desk. "We need your help understanding something, Uncle Walter. Did you know about these water rights transfers? About some kind of arrangement between my father and James Walsh?" Walter picked up the letter, his expression growing serious as he read. For a long moment, he was silent, seemingly lost in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of old secrets. "I wondered if this would ever come to light," he said softly. "Yes, I knew about the arrangement. I was there when it was made." Caroline leaned forward. "What arrangement? What did my father agree to keep silent about?" Walter's eyes met hers, filled with compassion. "It's a long story, one that both men wanted buried, but I suppose it's time for the truth." He turned to Graham. "It involves your brother, Daniel." Graham stiffened. "Daniel? What about him?" Walter sighed deeply. "The tractor accident that killed him. It wasn't an accident, Graham, at least not entirely." The color drained from Graham's face. "What are you saying?" Daniel had been drinking that day. He and Julian had another fight about the future of the farm. Daniel went out to clear his head, took the tractor out, even though he was in no condition to be operating it. Walter's eyes clouded with memory. James Walsh was working his fields that day. He saw the tractor go into the ditch, saw it overturn. He tried to save Daniel, but it was too late. Caroline felt sick as the truth began to emerge. And my father agreed to keep the drinking secret? Walter nodded. Julian was beside himself with grief, but also terrified of scandal. The Hale name meant everything to him. He begged James to say he arrived after the accident, that he hadn't seen what happened. James agreed. Out of compassion, I think. He had a son himself. He understood a father's pain. Graham stood up suddenly, pacing the room, his face a mask of shock and grief. My father covered up the truth about Daniel's death. All these years, I thought. Graham stood by the window in Walter's study, his back to Caroline and Walter as he processed the revelation about his brother's death. The silence in the room was heavy with decades of secrets. All these years, Graham finally said, his voice barely audible. He let me believe it was just an accident. He never said a word about Daniel drinking, about the fight they had. Walter sighed deeply. Your father wasn't good at facing painful truths, Graham, especially when they reflected on him. Their fight that day was about Julian's plans to expand the business, to turn Hale Farms into the corporation it is today. Daniel wanted to keep it a true family farm. Graham turned, his eyes finding Caroline's. Your father knew all of this. He saw what really happened, and he agreed to keep it quiet. Caroline nodded slowly, trying to reconcile this new information with the father she had known and loved. But the water rights transfer, was that payment for his silence? Not immediately, Walter explained. The accident happened in 1980. The transfer didn't occur until 2 years later. By then, Julian had expanded operations aggressively, buying up neighboring properties. James approached him about water access for the eastern part of the Walsh farm. Julian saw an opportunity to formalize their arrangement. To buy my father's continued silence, Caroline said, feeling a mixture of disappointment and understanding. Her father had been a practical man who had always done what was necessary to preserve the farm. It wasn't that simple, Walter said gently. James never asked for anything. Julian offered the transfer. I think in his own way Julian was trying to make amends, not just for asking James to lie, but for the direction he took the company after Daniel's death, a direction Daniel had fought against. Graham rejoined them at the desk, his expression troubled but calmer. So Preston was right. There was an improper agreement behind these transfers. Walter shook his head firmly. There was a private agreement between two men, yes, but there was nothing illegal about the transfer itself. Julian had every right to sell those water rights at whatever price he chose. But if Preston reveals the circumstances, Caroline began. It would be embarrassing for both families, Walter acknowledged, but it wouldn't invalidate the transfers. Preston is bluffing, trying to pressure you before the hearing. Graham picked up the old letter, his fingers tracing his father's signature. He didn't just cover up the truth about Daniel, he buried Daniel's vision for the farm along with him. Caroline reached for Graham's hand, understanding the betrayal he was feeling. I'm so sorry, Graham. Graham's fingers tightened around hers. All these years I've been building something my brother would have hated. I've been living my father's dream, not my own, not Daniel's. Walter watched them with knowing eyes. Perhaps that's the real reason you fought so hard to protect the Walsh farm, Graham. Deep down, you recognized what it represented, the kind of farming operation Daniel would have wanted to preserve. The insight struck Graham visibly. He looked at Caroline, really looked at her as if seeing her and her farm in a new light. You're right. From the first time I visited your farm, something about it felt right, like coming home. Caroline felt tears prick her eyes at the raw honesty in his voice. It is home. It could be our home, not just mine, not just a property to protect, but ours. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond their arrangement. Graham's eyes held hers, filled with an emotion she hadn't dared hope for. Walter cleared his throat, breaking the moment. The commission hearing is in 3 days. Preston doesn't have anything that can legally challenge your position, but he'll try to use this history to create doubt and apply pressure. Graham nodded, his businessman's mind clearly working through the problem. We'll need to be prepared. If he brings up the old agreement in public, we'll need to address it, directly. The truth, Caroline said firmly. After all these years, maybe it's time for the truth to come out. They left Walter's house with a clearer understanding of the past, but uncertain about the future. The drive back to the farm was quiet, both of them processing what they had learned. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the Walsh farm, Graham finally broke the silence. I never knew Daniel was unhappy with our father's plans. I was too young to understand the arguments they had. After he died, I just did what my father expected, took over the business, expanded it further. I never questioned whether it was what Daniel would have wanted or what I wanted. Caroline looked at him, seeing the weight of this realization in the set of his shoulders. What do you want, Graham? Not what your father wanted, not what the business needs, but you. Graham parked the car and turned to face her, his expression more open and vulnerable than she had ever seen it. I want to honor my brother's memory. I want to reconnect with the land the way he did. And I want... He stopped, seeming to gather his courage. I want this arrangement between us to be real. Caroline's heart stuttered in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want our marriage to end after the commission hearing, Graham said, his voice low and certain. I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a business arrangement for me. I'm saying I'm falling in love with you, Caroline. The words she had longed to hear but had been afraid to hope for washed over her like a warm summer rain. Caroline reached for him, her hand touching his face gently. It stopped being just an arrangement for me too, she whispered. I've been trying so hard not to fall in love with you, but I couldn't help it. Graham pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the tenderness and passion they had been keeping at bay for weeks. This wasn't the quick, formal kiss of their courthouse wedding. This was real, deep, transformative. When they finally broke apart, Caroline rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? Now, Graham said, a new lightness in his voice, we face the commission hearing together, honestly, as partners, and then we figure out how to blend our lives and our legacies in a way that honors both our families. They spent the next 2 days preparing for the hearing, working with Graham's lawyers to address any challenges Preston might raise. They also visited Ellen at the nursing home together, sharing a simplified version of what they had learned about the connection between their families. I always wondered why your father was so generous with those water rights, Ellen mused, looking at Graham with new understanding. James never explained it fully, just said Julian Hale had done right by him in the end. That's one way to look at it, Graham said with a wry smile. Ellen patted his hand. Family histories are complicated, dear. What matters is what you build together going forward. On the morning of the commission hearing, Caroline stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down her simple blue dress, the same one she had worn for their courthouse wedding. It seemed fitting somehow, marking both the beginning of their arrangement and the beginning of something real. Graham appeared in the doorway, handsome in his suit but with an approachable warmth that hadn't been there before. Ready? Caroline nodded, taking a deep breath. Ready. The county building was packed when they arrived. Word had spread about the contentious development proposal, drawing farmers, business owners, and concerned citizens from throughout the county. Preston sat at the front with his team of lawyers and consultants, looking confident. Walter Thompson slipped into the seat behind Caroline and Graham just as the hearing was called to order. I'm here for moral support, he whispered. Commissioner Wilson began by explaining the proposal. Westland Development's plan to purchase several properties for a commercial complex that would include a shopping center, office buildings, and a hotel. The development would bring jobs and tax revenue, but would also significantly change the rural character of that part of the county. Preston presented first, his presentation slick and professional, emphasizing economic benefits and promising minimal environmental impact. He made no mention of the Walsh farm or the water rights issue, which made Caroline increasingly nervous. What was he planning? When it was their turn, Graham stepped up to the podium, Caroline beside him. His presentation focused on the environmental impact the development would have, specifically on the watershed that fed not only the Hale farms, but several other agricultural operations in the county. The Walsh farm, which has been in my wife's family for generations, contains critical water resources that support sustainable agriculture throughout the Eastern Valley, Graham explained, his voice steady and authoritative. Allowing commercial development to disrupt this watershed would be short-sighted and potentially disastrous for local farming. As they finished their presentation, Preston rose for his rebuttal. The smug smile on his face made Caroline's stomach knot with apprehension. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale present a compelling case for preservation," Preston began, his tone condescending. "But I must question the timing and motivation behind their recent marriage. It seems convenient that Mr. Hale would suddenly marry the owner of the only property standing in the way of our development, especially given certain historical arrangements between the Hale and Walsh families." A murmur ran through the audience. Preston was making his move. "I have evidence suggesting that the water rights Mr. Hale is so concerned about protecting were transferred under questionable circumstances 40 years ago, as part of a private arrangement between Julian Hale and James Walsh." Preston held up copies of the documents they had seen in Walter's study. An arrangement that involved silence about a tragic accident. Caroline felt Graham tense beside her. Before he could respond, she stepped forward to the microphone. "Mr. Preston is referring to a private agreement between my father and Graham's father following the death of Graham's brother," Caroline said clearly, refusing to be intimidated. "Yes, there was an agreement. My father witnessed the accident that took Daniel Hale's life and agreed not to disclose certain details out of compassion for a grieving family." She turned to look at Graham, drawing strength from his supportive nod. "Years later, Julian Hale chose to transfer certain water rights to our farm, rights that had historically belonged to the Walsh property before the Hales expanded their operations. These transfers were legal and properly documented." Graham stepped up beside her. "Mr. Preston is attempting to use painful family history to cast doubt on legitimate property rights. It's a desperate tactic that has no bearing on the environmental concerns we've raised about this development." Preston's smile faltered slightly. He had clearly expected them to be caught off guard by his revelation. "The circumstances of these transfers raise serious ethical questions." "No, they don't," Walter Thompson's voice rang out as he stood up from his seat. "As someone who was present when the agreement was made, I can attest that it was between two honorable men dealing with a tragic situation as best they could. There was nothing illegal or unethical about it." Commissioner Alvarez leaned forward. "Mr. Preston, do you have any evidence that the water rights transfers were illegal or improperly executed?" Preston hesitated. "Not technically, but then I suggest we return to the actual matter at hand," Alvarez said firmly. "The environmental impact of the proposed development on local water resources." From that point, the hearing shifted in their favor. Several local farmers spoke in support of preserving the watershed, and even some business owners expressed concerns about the scale of Preston's proposal. When the commission finally called for a vote, it was unanimous against the Westland development proposal in its current form. The relief that washed over Caroline was overwhelming. The farm was safe, their position secure. As people began to file out of the meeting room, Preston approached them, his expression tight with anger. "This isn't over, Hale. I'll be back with a revised proposal." Graham's arm slid around Caroline's waist, holding her close. "And we'll still be here, Preston, together." The possessiveness in his voice wasn't for show this time. It was real. Caroline leaned into his embrace, feeling truly secure for the first time in months. Outside the county building, Walter hugged them both. "Your fathers would be proud today, not just of the outcome, but of how you faced the truth together." As they drove back to the farm, their farm now in more ways than one, Caroline felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The immediate threat was gone, and in its place was something unexpected and wonderful. A real marriage, a true partnership. Graham parked in front of the farmhouse and turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "There's something I need to tell you." Caroline's heart skipped with sudden anxiety. "What is it?" "The day before the wedding, when we signed our agreement, I included a clause you might not have noticed." Graham looked slightly nervous, which was so unlike him that Caroline grew concerned. "What clause?" "The one that said all debts would be settled, and the farm would remain in your name regardless of how long our marriage lasted. Graham squeezed her hands. Even if we had divorced the day after the commission hearing, the farm would still be yours, free and clear. Caroline stared at him in surprise. But that wasn't necessary. That wasn't part of our arrangement. I know, Graham said softly, but I wanted you to be secure, no matter what happened between us. And I wanted you to have the choice to stay or go based on your feelings, not obligation. The realization of what he had done, giving her complete freedom from the beginning, made Caroline's eyes fill with tears. You never told me. I didn't want it to influence how you felt about me, Graham admitted. I wanted anything that developed between us to be real. Caroline touched his face gently. It is real. What I feel for you has nothing to do with arrangements or clauses or business deals. I love you, Graham Hale, the man who fixes my chicken coop without being asked, who reads classic novels because his mother loved them, who secretly wanted to be a farmer like his brother. Graham pulled her close, his kiss full of promise and certainty. And I love you, Caroline Hale, the woman who showed me what really matters, who reminded me of the man I wanted to be, who brought me home when I didn't even know I was lost. As twilight settled over the Walsh farm, their farm, Caroline and Graham sat on the porch swing, planning their future together. Not a marriage of convenience, but a true partnership built on understanding, respect, and love that had grown in the most unexpected of circumstances. I was thinking, Graham said, his arm around her shoulders, about what you said regarding this being our home. Caroline looked up at him. What about it? What if we made it official? I could move in here permanently, and we could use some of the Hale resources to restore the farm to what it once was, what it could be again. You'd give up your big house on the hill? Caroline asked, surprised. Graham smiled, kissing her forehead. It was never a home, Caroline, just a house. This place with you is home. And Hale Enterprises? Caroline asked. What about the business your father built? Graham was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. I'm thinking about restructuring, scaling back some of the corporate operations, refocusing on sustainable farming practices, the kind Daniel would have approved of. Maybe even converting part of the Hale property back to the family farm it once was. The vision he described made Caroline's heart swell with pride and love. This was the man she had glimpsed from the beginning. Thoughtful, principled, capable of growth and change. We could do it together, she suggested. Combine our knowledge and resources. Graham's smile was warm with possibility. The Walsh Hale Farming Cooperative. I liked the sound of that. As darkness fell and stars appeared above the fields that had sustained generations of both their families, Caroline and Graham sealed their new beginning with a kiss, one that held the promise of all the days to come, days they would face, together not by arrangement, but by choice. The next morning, Caroline woke to the unfamiliar but wonderful sensation of Graham's arm around her waist, his steady breathing warm against her neck. For the first time since their wedding, they had truly spent the night as husband and wife. She slipped out of bed quietly, wanting to let him sleep after the emotional toll of the previous days. In the kitchen, she started coffee and was surprised to hear a car coming up the driveway. Through the window, she recognized Walter's vehicle. Caroline met him on the porch, coffee mug in hand. Walter, this is an early visit. Walter smiled, holding up a thick folder. I found something last night that I thought you and Graham should see. Graham's still sleeping, Caroline said, gesturing toward the kitchen. But come in, I'll get you some coffee. As they sat at the kitchen table, Walter opened the folder to reveal old blueprints and photographs. These were Daniel's plans for the original Hale homestead. He wanted to restore it, make it a model of sustainable family farming alongside the larger operation. Caroline studied the yellowed papers with growing excitement. The plans were detailed and thoughtful. Innovative irrigation systems, crop rotation schedules, barn designs that maximized efficiency while minimizing environmental impact. These are amazing, she breathed, recognizing elements that her own father had incorporated into the Walsh farm over the years. Did Graham ever see these? No, Walter shook his head. Julian kept them locked away after Daniel died. I found them among my own files last night. Daniel had given me copies for safekeeping. Good morning. Graham's voice came from the doorway. He was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, his hair still mussed from sleep. "Uncle Walter, what brings you here so early?" Walter gestured to the plans spread across the table. "Your brother's legacy, Graham. I thought it was time you saw it." Graham approached slowly, his expression a mixture of surprise and emotion as he recognized his brother's handwriting. He sat beside Caroline, his hand finding hers under the table as he began to explore the documents. "This is," Graham's voice caught, "this is exactly what he used to talk about. I was too young to understand the details then, but I remember him sketching these barn designs." Walter nodded. Daniel had a vision for the future of farming, one that balanced innovation with tradition, profit with sustainability. After he died, Julian took the company in a different direction. But these plans, they're still viable, perhaps even more relevant today than they were then. Graham looked at Caroline, his eyes shining with purpose. "This is what we were talking about last night. A way to honor both our families' legacies while building something new together." Caroline squeezed his hand, feeling the rightness of the moment. Daniel's vision and my father's practical approach to farming, they complement each other. "We could make this work, Graham." Walter watched them with evident satisfaction. "I thought you might say that, which is why I brought something else." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "My wedding gift to you both. A bit late, but hopefully worth the wait." Inside the envelope was a deed, transferring ownership of the original Hale homestead from Walter to Graham and Caroline jointly. "Bought it from your father years ago," Walter explained to Graham. "I always hoped that someday someone would restore it the way Daniel had planned. Who better than his brother and the daughter of James Walsh?" Graham was speechless, clearly, overwhelmed by the gift and its significance. Caroline thanked Walter for both of them, her own eyes misty with emotion. After Walter left, promising to return for Sunday dinner, Graham and Caroline spread the plans across the kitchen table again, beginning to dream together about how they might implement Daniel's vision while incorporating techniques from the Walsh farm. "This feels right," Graham said, his arm around Caroline's waist as they studied the blueprints. "Like everything that happened, all the pain and loss, the secrets and arrangements, was leading to this moment. To us." "To us," Caroline agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "No more arrangements, just love and hard work, and building a future that honors the past without being bound by it." "No more arrangements," Graham echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss that felt like coming home. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Caroline and Graham stood together in the meadow between the Walsh farm and the old Hale homestead, surrounded by friends and family. The restored farmhouse gleamed with fresh paint, and the fields around them were bursting with new growth. This was their real wedding day, not a hasty courthouse ceremony born of necessity, but a joyful celebration of the love that had grown between them against all odds. Ellen Walsh, now living in the cozy mother-in-law suite they had built onto the farmhouse, wiped tears from her eyes as Caroline and Graham exchanged new vows, vows written from the heart rather than drawn up by lawyers. "I promise to love you not out of convenience or arrangement," Graham said, his voice steady and sure as he held Caroline's hands in his, "but because you showed me what truly matters in this life. You brought me back to the land, back to myself, back to the path my brother would have wanted for me. You are my home, Caroline, and I will spend every day making sure you never doubt my love." Caroline blinked back tears as she spoke her own vows. "I promise to love you through all seasons, through planting and harvest, through abundance and scarcity. What began as an arrangement to save my family's land became the love that saved my heart. You are the partner I never expected, but always needed, and I will cherish every day we build this life together." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, cheers erupted from their gathered loved ones. Walter Thompson, serving as their best man, was the first to embrace them both. "Daniel would be so proud," he whispered to Graham. "Both our fathers would be proud of what you two have created here." The reception took place in the newly restored barn, decorated with wildflowers from Caroline's garden and twinkling lights that gave the rustic space a magical glow. Local farmers and business leaders mingled with Hale Enterprises executives, all witnesses to the remarkable partnership that was already transforming agriculture in the county. The Walsh Hale Cooperative had quickly gained recognition for its innovative approach to sustainable farming, combining traditional methods with modern technology in ways that preserved the land while maximizing productivity. Graham had restructured Hale Enterprises, scaling back the corporate side and reinvesting in family farms throughout the region. As evening fell and their guests danced under the stars, Graham led Caroline away from the celebration to the small hill overlooking both properties, now seamlessly joined into one thriving operation. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her, waist from behind as they looked out over their land. "More than I ever thought possible," Caroline replied, leaning back against him. "When I agreed to marry you that day in your kitchen, I never imagined we'd end up here." Graham turned her gently to face him, his eyes reflecting the stars above. "I think part of me knew even then. Not consciously, perhaps, but something in me recognized what you and this land represented. The path back to what matters." "From convenience to love," Caroline murmured, reaching up to touch his face. "It wasn't the journey either of us expected. But it led us exactly where we needed to be," Graham finished, bending to kiss her with all the tenderness and passion of a man who had found his true home. As they walked hand in hand back to their wedding celebration, the two farmhouses stood as silent witnesses to their journey, one built by the Walsh family generations ago, one being restored according to Daniel Hale's vision, different yet complementary, like Caroline and Graham themselves. What had begun as a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement between two strangers, had transformed into the deepest kind of love. A love built on shared values, mutual respect, and the courage to look beyond the surface to the truth beneath. In the end, they had made vows that mattered, not out of necessity or duty, but out of a love that had grown in the most unexpected of circumstances. Vows they meant with all their hearts. The end